There are very few moments in our lives where we have the privilege to witness history taking place. This is one of those moments. This is one of those times. On the 17th of December 2010, Mohamed Bouazizi, a 26-year-old unemployed Tunisian literary, sparked the Tunisian Revolution and the wider Arab Spring. At around 11:30 a.m. local time, Bouazizi doused himself with gasoline and set himself alight with a match. Less than an hour after his belongings of a street vendor were confiscated and refused to be returned. Outraged by the events that led to Bouazizi's self-immolation, protests began in Sidi Bouzid within hours, starting the Arab Spring that would shake the whole world. The chronology of the following events surprised with its speed and scale. On the 18th of December, protests appeared in Tunisia, and 10 days later, there were protests in Algeria. And in January, protests started in Jordan, Mauritania, Sudan, Oman, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Yemen. In February, protests appeared in Iraq, Bahrain, Libya, Kuwait, Morocco, and Lebanon. On the 15th of March, there were protests in Syria, and 2 months later, protests started in Israeli border areas. And while in some countries, protests overthrew their governments in a relatively peaceful way, Libya, for example, was being torn apart by a civil war. In some countries, protests were major and caused governmental changes, while in other countries, there were minor protests that did not achieve any substantial results. And even though there were different people in different countries, addressing different governments, they were fighting for the same rights and same things. Thus, the same question appeared. What were the motivations that led to such powerful protests? What caused so many people that kept silent for decades to take to the streets and claim their rights and freedoms? How did they manage to organize such movements distributing information in countries with very strict media control and censorship? What are the outcomes? And what is the future? Issues that people in the Arab world were facing were neither new nor exclusive, but were dramatic in their region. Most countries where protests took place had strong dictatorship or monarchy governments, with the police suppressing force and human rights violations being widely spread. It was aggravated with economic decline, high rate of unemployment, and extreme poverty. In recent decades, though, rising living standards and literacy rates produced a large number of aspirations, and at this point the need of reforms was great, but there were none of them. Censorship and governmentally controlled media provided their citizens with carefully selected material and had a lot of blackouts at places that would probably jeopardize stability of those regimes. But why did the system fail in 2011 then? Mohamed Bouazizi was not the first Tunisian to set himself alight in an act of public protest. Abdeslam Trimer set himself ablaze in the town of Monastir on March 3, 2010. But the key difference in Sidi Bouzid was that locals fought to get news on what was happening out, and they succeeded. We could protest for 2 years here, but without videos no one would take any notice of us. Rojdi Horshani, a relative of Mohamed Bouazizi, said. On December 17, he and Ali Bouazizi, a cousin of Mohamed Bouazizi, posted a video for a peaceful protest led by the young man's mother, Manoubi, outside the municipality building, and that evening that video was aired on Al Jazeera's Mubashir channel. Al Jazeera's news media team, which surfs the web looking for video from across the Arab world, had picked up the footage via Facebook. And the following story of the uprising can be seen via hashtags on Twitter. Hashtag Bouazizi became hashtag Sidi Bouzid, and then hashtag Tunisia. A 27-year-old Tunisian blogger, Lina Ben-Mehani, was nominated for 2011 Nobel Peace Prize for her coverage of the uprising in Tunisia. And in Egypt, modern technologies and social media also connected people, giving them an opportunity to share information and organize everything. Distribute information via Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and attracted attention of the whole world. The total rate of tweets from Egypt and around the world about political changes in the country ballooned from 2,300 to 230,000 a day. Wael Ghonim, a Google executive, organized a Facebook page called We're All Khaled Said in memory of a young man, Khaled Said, who was beaten to death by police in 2010. In its first 2 minutes, the page grew from 0 to 300 and then to 33,000 by the end of the day. Together, we wanted justice for Khaled Said, and we wanted to put an end to torture, said Wael Ghonim. And then, inspired by the Tunisian revolution, on January 24, 2010, he posted a call for a mass demonstration to be held on the 25th of January, the National Police Day. It was a revolution against torture, poverty, corruption, and unemployment. And by the end of the demonstrations, that lasted 18 days, the page had grown to more than 500,000 members. So social media gave people canals of communication that they lacked and ways to attract attention to their problems. They found ways to have their voices finally heard. Wael Ghonim in his book Revolution 2.0 writes, "Social networking offered us an easy means to meet the provocative, critical youth that we were. It also enabled us to defy the fears associated with voicing opposition. The virtual world seemed further from oppressive reach of the regime, and therefore many were encouraged to speak." Ghonim was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, and Time included him in its list of the most influential people of 2011. Protests in Egypt took place on Tahrir Square, Cairo, and the word Tahrir has an Arabic origin and means liberation. So 18-day protest on Tahrir Square led to Hosni Mubarak's resignation, which was announced on the 11th of February 2011 at 6 p.m. local time. Some other countries also overthrew their leaders, such as Tunisian uprising led to ousting of longtime president Zine El Abidine Ben Ali in January 2011, eventually leading to democratization of the country and to free and democratic elections. In Libya, civil war caused overthrowing of Muammar al-Gaddafi's government and eventually his murder. In Yemen, the President Ali Abdullah Saleh resigned after a month of protest. In Bahrain, there was the establishment of the Bahrain Independent Commission of Inquiry and the National Dialogue. And even though there were results seen at the moment, among all of these revolutions, of which I have just mentioned, only one has already finished, and it's Tunisian. And in the rest of the countries, there is still uprising and protests ongoing. So the future of the Arab Spring is still undecided, as many countries have just had some uprising that didn't have much result, while others are still fighting for their rights and democratization of their governments. But there are more than 42,000 people who died for it. There are eyes of the whole world watching changes in the Arab world, and not giving tyrants a chance to leave everything as it was. So many changes are done even in the countries with small rallies that took place. And now people know how much power they can have and what they can do once they decide that they have had enough. So the question now is about what path the Arabic countries will choose and what will this mean for the Western world. Especially once the Arab Spring activists have started to give advice and suggestions to those who have their own fight in the West. Not only the Arab world can feel the difference, but also the Western countries can see the influence of the Arab Spring that inspired the Occupy Wall Street movement, and, for example, anti-governmental and anti-Putin protests in Russia. Never has the power of the people appeared so human, so inspiring, so personal, so determined as in Tunisia, so daring as in Syria, so diverse as in Yemen, so humble as in Bahrain, so courageous as in Libya, or so humorous as in Egypt.